But now let's look at the cost of living crisis, and the latest inflation figures have been released today. The headline rate falling to 2.8% in the third quarter. Underlying inflation, this is the preferred indicator for the RBA, remains still above the RBA's target band. Here was the Treasurer when he wasn't having to take questions about the Prime Minister's flight upgrades. Here he was speaking about this earlier today.
Today's numbers show that we are on track for a soft landing in our economy. We are confident but not complacent about the substantial progress that we are making as a country. Inflation is back in the band.
OK, let's bring in now Economist Leith van Onselen. Leith, good to see you again. Look, what's your interpretation of this data today, both the underlying inflation rate and the headline figure?
Yeah, g'day, Sharri. Look, I think it certainly means that the Reserve Bank's going to be on hold until next year. So obviously, yes, the headline inflation rate fell to 2.8%, and that's great. But the reason for this fall was that we had a big fall in electricity prices because of the government's electricity subsidies and also petrol prices. So just to put that into perspective, electricity prices subtracted 0.4% from the quarterly inflation result, and fuel prices 0.25%. But Sharri, the Reserve Bank has repeatedly stated that it's going to ignore the headline result and it's going to look at the underlying inflation. And that came in at 0.8% for the quarter and 3.5% year on year. So both in quarterly terms and in annual terms, it's still above the RBA's target. And Australia still has among the highest core inflation in the advanced world. So I think based on that, the Reserve Bank's going to be on hold until next year.
Well, we've seen, you say Australia has among the highest inflation rates in the world, and we've seen the IMF forecasts back that up. I mean, Australia was the worst out of, I think, 42 countries. Why is the CPI here, remaining sticky, whereas it's starting to fall elsewhere around the world?
Yeah, look. To be fair, Australia's inflation started to rise later than the other countries, so it's because of that, it's obviously starting to fall later. But we do have domestic pressures here. So obviously we've had very, very strong, housing inflation. So housing inflation, so I'm talking about rents and construction costs and those sorts of things, have accounted for 0.2 to 20% to half of a lot of the inflation over recent quarters. And we've also had obviously this high energy inflation due to failures in energy policy and those sorts of things, which the government is trying to sweep under the carpet with its subsidies. So we have had a lot of, sticky domestic issues here, which has driven up inflation.
In terms of the homegrown factors, do you think these are higher than in other parts of the world? I mean, you've mentioned the housing crisis. We've previously spoken about the immigration rates pushing up inflation. Do you think those homegrown factors are still a big factor here in keeping inflation? I mean, it is falling, of course, but keeping it more persistent than elsewhere around the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we've had the factor that's driven down, that's actually pulled down Australia's inflation has been the tradable inflation. So that's all the stuff that you can pull off a container ship. So the tradable inflation's, running at a low level, about 1.5%. But it's the non-tradable stuff. So that's all your domestically driven inflation that's still running at around 4%. So we do have high, sticky domestic inflation, unfortunately, and that's the reason why Australia's core inflation is, among the highest in the world.
Immigration numbers were meant to start to fall. I mean, the Albanese government about 6 months ago announced that they were going to halve. It doesn't look like they're coming down. I think those forecasts are going to be proven utterly wrong. How do you think this is going to affect the housing crisis moving into 2025?
Yeah, look, certainly. So the May federal budget tipped that we'd have net overseas migration of 395,000. Now, based on the data we've had to date, it's going to top 500,000. Or be around about 500,000. So they've missed by about 100,000. And all indicators are that this financial year, where they tipped 260,000, we're probably going to get about 350,000 plus. So we've got much higher immigration than what the government projected. And what this means is that basically the rents are going to be higher than they should be otherwise. We're going to have this persistent rental inflation. It is coming off, but we are going to have this higher rental inflation than we should. It's also going to put upward pressure on new home prices, those sorts of things, which will keep the inflation fires burning, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Leith van Onselen, thank you so much for your time, as always.